If you want to outsmart an outcast, you gotta outthink them.
In order to think like one of these guys, you have to think like them.
Alright, so it's been a few months since Wednesday first came out, and it's still on the Netflix most watched list. And I get it, it's a super fun show that's widely palatable, it grabs some nostalgia but feels decidedly modern, and it's been marketed to hell and back. I enjoyed my first watch well enough. I even recommended it to people for a good, easy, rainy day or sick day watch, but seeing as it's the second most popular English language series, I think it should be more than a fun, easy watch. I think it should hold up under scrutiny. But the showrunners made some really bizarre storytelling decisions that made this show weirdly overcomplicated. And my ultimate frustration with that is that there's very little space for audience interaction. With mysteries in particular, it's the gaps in narrative explanation that pull us in. That we're missing information is why we try to anticipate what's coming next, but it's also how we subconsciously insert our own feelings, values, memories, preconceptions. That's one reason why we can all watch the same show and obviously come away with different feelings. That's how we feel personally connected to characters and plots that have nothing to do with us. And Wednesday is, as I've said, a really fun show with many strong attributes, namely Jenna Ortega, but it ultimately was a rather alienating show. It's too saturated with plot detail and supporting characters to have any meaningful narrative gaps that pull us in. Sure, some of this is subjective. I didn't really relate to any of the characters, maybe because I'm not a teenager, but in a really well-written story, characters can be relatable irrespective of their technical demographic. But I'm sure some people connected with the show more than I did. Nonetheless, the decision to pack in so much stuff leads to some issues with the storytelling. So here I've identified 6 of those issues, along with relatively minor adjustments that would fix or at least improve them. None of these would fix everything, but also none of these would require a dramatic overhaul of the whole show. On that note, some of the adjustments are mutually incompatible. These are just different solutions for building what I think would be a more compelling story. If you haven't seen Wednesday, nice job holding out, and consider this your warning for major spoilers. Super quickly, Wednesday takes the beloved Wednesday Addams character and presents her as a seemingly psychopathic, see problem number 6, teenager. After a violent outburst at regular high school, Wednesday is sent to the boarding school Nevermore, which hosts so-called outcasts of all kinds, kids with supernatural powers, but also just weird people, see problem number 1. There she meets werewolf Enid, siren Bianca, animator Xavier, shapeshifter Principal Weems, witch boy Rowan, bee boy Eugene, regular boy Tyler, and one of the Wednesdays, Thornhill. After witnessing a nasty monster murder, Wednesday uses her loyal sidekick Thing, her new psychic abilities, and a team of new friends who all come to love her for some reason to solve the mystery of this monster and the person controlling it, all while also investigating a crime pinned on her father years ago and dealing with the historic oppression of outcasts. Yeah, it's a whole lot for 8 episodes. It's a pretty wild ride, but that's sorta my point. In a good mystery show, even a multi-genre one, we should feel like we're co-pilots along with our protagonist. And that's true even when the mystery component isn't front and center. But overall, Wednesday's problem is that it's oversaturated with plot detail and characters that go largely undeveloped, so much so that it's hard to feel like we're actually inhabiting the world and joining the story as the audience. So here are 6 suggestions. If you disagree or have other ideas, please do leave a comment. This first one is the smallest change that could have the biggest payoff. The problem, this world isn't built out at all. The solution, change the reason why Wednesday attends Nevermore. The show starts with Wednesday attending a regular old high school until she's expelled for dumping freshwater piranhas in a chlorinated pool, and her parents decide to send her to Vermont Hogwarts, where mostly everyone has magical powers of some sort. But man, this opens up a lot of questions, and Wednesday herself, either because she knows everything already or because she just doesn't care, she doesn't need to learn about the world. Harry Potter, in comparison, goes into Hogwarts blind, so we're able to learn about the possibilities and limitations of his new magical world along with him. You might think this isn't really a problem here. The vampires, gorgons, faceless kids, and whatever the heck else is out there don't really impact our central plot and for the most part are just stagnant decoration. But the issue with this lack of clear world building is that it holds us at arm's length as the audience. The show opens up a huge world with a ton of unanswered questions. The local town knows about Nevermore, but does the whole world? Just how powerful are these kids? Do they all go get jobs in the normal world after school? There are too many questions to even start asking them as we watch. It's so oversaturated with information that we really only get as we go along. So after we see Rowan die and then mysteriously show up back on campus, there's no way on God's green earth that we could have predicted that Weems was impersonating him as a shapeshifter. We receive crucial story world information just as, or more accurately, right after we actually need it. Oh, Wednesday's dead, but don't worry, the creepy blonde girl that she talks to sometimes can resurrect her. Revealing information in this fashion makes us backseat passengers to the story, which is particularly a shame in a mystery show. Special powers are only really interesting if we know their limitations. Without limitations, powers are just a blank check for plot convenience. And it's more than kinda cheap writing. The consequence here is that we, the audience, are in a passive position. We can only ever receive information. We can't engage with it or even imagine ourselves as students at Nevermore, because I don't know what the heck goes on there. So this first change is aimed at establishing clearer world building and, most importantly, communicating to the audience at least some parameters for the supernatural of this world. And it's super simple. In the show, as is, Wednesday has been having visions for a while, but she's kept them secret. To the world, she's a normie, someone without special abilities, and her parents sent her to Nevermore just 'cause. The criteria for attending and the timing of her attendance aren't exactly clear, but that's fine. It's not a huge plot hole or anything. Maybe Morticia did secretly know about the visions, but it's a big missed opportunity for audience engagement. Instead, they easily could have had Morticia and Gomez explicitly know that Wednesday is having visions, which could mean she's ready to go to Nevermore. And this would be our first lens into the greater supernatural world. Even if Wednesday herself doesn't care, there would be natural expository dialogue like, "Welcome to school, we've had psychics before, here are the classes you'll be taking now that you're supernatural. Don't worry that you don't fit into the main groups, we also have shapeshifters and animators, etc, etc, etc. All this info could easily be packaged as irrelevant background detail, but then when big twists are revealed, it isn't brand new information that we never could have imagined. This one frustrates me because it's such a simple thing to do, it feels like a conscious choice not to do it. The only scene that explicitly builds out the world is Enid giving Wednesday a quick tour of social groups, but that was basically just a shout out to classic teen rom-coms. It didn't give us any information that we needed for the rest of the series, and it dumped a ton of detail that went entirely underexplored. And making the adjustment of Wednesday being enrolled once everyone knows about her visions wouldn't automatically fix that, but it would create a seamless narrative path into natural world building. Next up, problem number 2, the monster really isn't mysterious. Solution, keep it hidden. Now look, normally I don't complain about flimsy visual effects, largely because if the writing is good enough, they don't matter, but this thing looks so ridiculous in a show that has heavy focus on visuals. The goth atmosphere is pretty important, so it's genuinely a disruption anytime this thing comes on screen. This show has no problem borrowing from other stories, so why not grab something from Sherlock Holmes and style this mystery like The Hound of the Baskervilles? That means keeping the monster hidden, as they did at the very beginning of the show. We see that hiker getting attacked by something mysterious, but then less than an hour later we see the monster itself. And in the very next episode, Wednesday starts to doubt her sanity because Rowan has shown up again. But we can't doubt it alongside her, because we know exactly what's killing people. It's that weird thing we just saw. We know Rowan's dead. If we hadn't seen it, and then Rowan showed up again, we'd have cause to doubt the existence of the monster. We'd wonder if there was something unreliable about Wednesday's perception. We'd experience a mystery. We'd be pulled into a narrative. This show doesn't really manage suspense very well. For example, when Uncle Fester shows up randomly, and randomly he's able to recognize the monster as a hide.
It's called a hide.
You've seen one before.
Oh yeah.
Oh, well, isn't that convenient?
And again, if they had established the universe a bit better, that could be something Wednesday actually works out herself along with us. Instead, clues and answers just sort of pop up randomly like we're watching Dora the Explorer, not an actual mystery. Sherlock Holmes, Season 1 of Stranger Things, Jaws, they all keep their monsters largely hidden from the audience to pull us into the mystery and avoid the downsides of crappy visual effects. Hiding the monster would have built some genuine suspense, an element of fear, and intrigue for the audience, and it also would have built a more natural narrative pathway for Wednesday to be the major detective, the only one who thinks the monster is real. This one is my favorite, problem number 3. As fun as they are, there are too many characters. Solution: delete Rowan. The supporting characters in this show are super fun, but there are a few too many for any of them to be particularly developed. Now, Bianca is given a vague sort of arc, but it was hard to tell exactly what prompted it. When we first meet her, she's just plain old mean queen bee, classic popular girl who feels threatened by Wednesday. But by the end, she's not remotely like that. She saves the day twice and seems really interesting and kind. It actually seems like she was always a thoughtful, kind person. So why was she so mean to Wednesday to begin with? Rowan, on the other hand, doesn't get to stick around for very long. He's only really in the first episode, and as a supporting character, his job is just to introduce the prophecy. That's all he has to do. They spend all this time with strange attempts at killing Wednesday. He has a whole big speech about why he hates her. It's built up to be this big, huge thing, and then he straight up dies in episode 1. So easy fix, just get rid of him. He's super unnecessary and gets way too much narrative emphasis in the first episode when we're just figuring out this world and this story. And you know who could use a much better reason to hate Wednesday? And who ends up being present at the scene depicted in the prophecy? Bianca. So instead, we could have Bianca inherit the prophecy, and maybe not actively try to kill Wednesday, but actively loathe her. Maybe try to convince Xavier she's no good, whatever. And I'm sure if Bianca were included in the drawing, given how it all does go down, it would look a lot more like Wednesday was fighting on the same side as Crackstone. And I don't know, maybe Xavier could redraw the thing and realize something about the way it's angled so he knows Wednesday is one of the good guys. That's a little ridiculous, so probably better if Wednesday just has to slowly prove herself to Bianca, has to do something to earn Bianca's trust. This solution would build Bianca into a real antagonist, not a villain who wants to destroy the world, but a simple human antagonist to add an overarching human story. We all love it when an antagonist teams up with the hero to defeat the villain, and with this change, that teaming up would be genuinely earned. Bianca would have to confront the unreliability of her family and learn to trust Wednesday. As is, it's a random side plot for Bianca to deal with her Siren family. She gets a really unnecessary romance, and it just seems like plain plot convenience for her to join the good guys. But she's a really cool character, and she deserved more time and narrative emphasis. Meanwhile, I had to look up Rowan's name because he's so forgettable. There is a downside here. If they still want Weems to be a shapeshifter, they'd have to come up with another way of revealing that, but that's easy enough, or honestly, not necessary. Unless Weems comes back from the dead next season, it was kind of a waste that we learned so much about her backstory, her antagonism towards Morticia, and shapeshifting abilities, so in this hypothetical change, getting rid of Rowan, I'd also probably keep Weems alive so we could unpack her character in the longer run. Overall, this solution gives both the protagonist and the audience more to work with, more concentrated depth on a promising character, and less time wasting in the pilot. Problem number 4, these villains are pretty convoluted. Solution, condense them, and also get rid of Goody. In this 8-episode season, Wednesday deals with a monster, whoever is turning into that monster, whoever is controlling whoever's turning into that monster, 3 sorta antagonists in Bianca, Weems, and the sheriff, and as it turns out, a pilgrim zombie. That's quite a bit, and again, as the audience, we're sorta overloaded with that plot, so personally, when I was watching the finale in particular, I didn't get that oh wow, here we go feeling. It was more like, oh okay, wow, okay, as things got weirder and weirder. So the big bad of this season is Thornhill, and to map out her plan for a second, she knew she needed Wednesday's blood to release Crackstone, and she knew she needed various body parts to bring Crackstone back in human form. And her plan, rather than use her status as a teacher and get close to Wednesday on her own, her plan was to take this random teenager, release his hide powers. She wants to send this one monster into a school of monsters to fetch body parts. So that's crazy, but whatever. My frustration here is that all that crucial info is delivered to us via her villain monologue in the last episode, telling us rather than showing us and building it out slowly through the show's narrative. and maybe because of that, there's some problems here with the bad guy logic. I still don't know to what extent Tyler was evil. The whole time I thought he genuinely liked Wednesday but was being horribly manipulated by Thornhill, but then he drops this evil, triumphant line speaking as his regular self.
What does it feel like?
What does what feel like?
To lose.
But is there still a normal nice guy buried in there somewhere? Was there ever? I don't know. But worse, the zombie Crackstone guy makes no sense. In the first Harry Potter, before Harry is even at Hogwarts, Hagrid plants the narrative seed that some people think Voldemort is still out there waiting to come back and that he's got a reason to kill Harry. So when it's revealed that Voldemort has been behind everything, it's a satisfying close to multiple open questions. Here, while we get some historical glimpses of Crackstone, it's not until the burst of action in the finale that he's revealed as an active villain. And then he again makes no sense. His entire ethos revolves around hating magic, and when Wednesday turns up to fight him again after she's supposed to be dead, he literally asks what possible dark sorcery she used, as if he himself hasn't been dead for hundreds of years. He's just too silly and then too easily defeated by two teenagers for me to really feel the stakes here. We didn't know about the resurrection all season, and we don't know what he can or can't do, so there's no ticking clock and no element of foreboding or fear, really. So while there are a couple of ways to simplify the threat of this season, my solution is just get rid of Crackstone. We don't need him. Thornhill could have just as easily been collecting blood or bodies or whatever for some potion or spell for herself, and that would come with narrative meaning. Thornhill could be someone who gets close to Wednesday, who presents as a key ally only to be the big bad of the whole season. And wonderfully, the solution also means getting rid of my least favorite part of the series, Goody. I can't stand this creepy kid. I don't care about the show's forced metaphor of oppression and indigenous Americans. It doesn't really work, and she just shows up whenever the writers feel like it. Instead, spend that time building up Thornhill as someone we can understand on some level, so that even if the reveal is predictable, it would land as much more of a betrayal to our protagonist and, alongside her, the audience. Next up, number 5, Xavier is pretty boring and the love triangle is very hollow. Solution: incorporate the art. Wednesday's cello is awesome. I've seen some criticism that the Paint It Black cover at the end of episode 1 was just geared towards social media, and maybe that's true, but my main issue is that her cello just goes away. During that cover, we see multiple characters hearing the music and feeling moved by it. So moved that I actually thought maybe her music was some sort of weird witchcraft, but no, it's just beautiful and I really like that. But it only matters in one singular other moment, when the outcasts hang out at Normie Plymouth Plantation and she performs with the band. After that, it may as well have never existed. Again, an instance of overpacking this series with plot detail that isn't fleshed out or meaningful. Speaking of which, it's an obvious complaint that the love triangle was really forced, unnecessary, and perhaps antithetical to the build of Wednesday Addams herself. To be honest, I love a good love triangle, but I completely agree that Wednesday's feelings for Tyler don't make a lot of sense, and that Xavier was a pretty weak character. He didn't have much of a function this season, even though he took up a lot of time, but he could have been the bridge between Wednesday and all the kids who think she's a weirdo, or, if we went with my Bianca edit, that she's dangerous. Wednesday isn't particularly socially adept, nor does she want to be, so I think it would have worked really well if her connection to Xavier wasn't based on conversation or socializing, but rather rooted in their mutual love of art, hers musical, his drawing. They hint at it. Xavier is so moved by her cello playing that he draws that massive, borderline creepy portrait of her playing, but they could have done way more, and to whatever extent Wednesday's persona is actually distinct from her inner self, music could be how that inner self manifests, and that could be something Xavier could understand. This wouldn't fix everything. If it's not done well, it wouldn't fix anything, but it just seems like a weird missed opportunity that was right there to explore. And what it definitely could have solved is what I think of as the Rory Gilmore effect, where every boy who isn't in her immediate family instantly falls in love with our protagonist for no ostensible reason. It's frustrating because it's hard to get invested in any relationships or potential relationships if I have no idea what sparked the connection. I guess Tyler was playing her the whole time, again, I don't really know, but Xavier is just obsessed to the point of wanting his memory wiped. So let's have Wednesday appreciate his art a little more, give her her cello back, and make this connection exist on a deeper, non-verbal level. I might actually care about them. And finally, the big one, it's sort of an overhaul. Wednesday herself is super inconsistent. Solution, just pick a lane and decide if she's a classic hero or an anti-hero, and also cut her narration. So both of these archetypes, hero, anti-hero, do fight for the good side. The crucial distinction is that the anti-hero does the right thing, but for the wrong reasons. The term gets overused to oblivion and is often conflated with either a villain protagonist or a standard hero with some flaws. Characters like Tony Soprano, Patrick Bateman, Joe from You, I'd categorize them not as anti-heroes, but rather villain protagonists. They make for good characters when we feel ourselves understanding their motives and sort of sympathizing with them maybe while they do horrible stuff. Actual anti-heroes aren't actually all that common because they're really difficult to write, but they include Snape, who fights for the good guys but not for the greater good, and Han Solo, who initially just needs some cash.
I ain't in this for your revolution, and I'm not in it for you, princess. I expect to be well paid. I'm in it for the money.
So the anti-hero is not just a good guy with an edgy sense of humor, and here it feels like the show wants to have its cake and eat it too. It feels like they took the concept of an anti-hero and just cranked her through a very standard hero narrative without doing any work to reconcile the differences there. They give Wednesday some serious character flaws that go beyond your standard flawed hero, but she never gives us any reason to doubt that she's fighting for the good side. But what motivates her, I don't actually know. This matters. Wednesday is the heart of the show, and the way she navigates the world needs to be something we understand. As the story unfolds and we learn more about her vulnerabilities and flaws, we should become emotionally engaged in her struggle, particularly her internal one. It's a risk taking a character that's normally in a supporting role, like Wednesday Addams, and making them the protagonist. If you're gonna do that, I think you really need to storyboard the character from inside out, and it seems like they just didn't. Right on the surface, there's some inconsistency with Wednesday's one-liners, like how it would be awful if people found out she almost killed someone because then they know she didn't finish the job, dark. But then her character is deeply shocked to discover that her dad may have killed someone. That can make sense. April Ludgate on Parks and Rec is a character who often hits sardonic one-liners about death and so on.
Going to a Halloween party at our house. It's gonna be the greatest thing ever.
Someone will die.
Of fun.
And of murder.
There's gonna be beer.
But is clearly and increasingly a caring person who would obviously never actually physically harm someone. April Ludgate's outer persona of darkness and apathy is just that, a persona. And that's exactly what Wednesday is like, at times. At other times, she's ruthlessly indifferent to and uncaring towards her friends. She places them in mortal danger with no qualms, which is also something she does to a homeless man who ends up dead and then entirely unacknowledged. But most tellingly, the very first thing we see Wednesday do is unleash piranhas on the entire water polo team, smiling as she does so and saying she'd do it again. If anything, that's villain territory. This isn't April Ludgate. And crucially, we can tell the show wants us to know that. It's Wednesday's character introduction, and it was all over the ads before the show came out. Now, Wednesday does have some personal stakes this season because of the prophecy, and if she does care about her family, because of her father's name. So she could be driven by selfishness that just so happens to line up with the greater good. And it's pretty clear that the show does want her to be an anti-hero. They even have her say, quote, "I don't believe in heaven or hell, but I do believe in revenge." Ooh, I have no sense of right or wrong, so I couldn't be a hero. I only fight against evil when it works for me. Fine. Setting her up as an anti-hero also lets the show make some social commentary here and there, even if it's more annoying than anything else.
You know you should really get on Insta, Snapchat, and TikTok.
I find social media to be a soul-sucking void of meaningless affirmation.
The critical eyes of an angsty, alienated anti-hero casting a sarcastic light on features of our regular life is a well-worn literary tradition, and particularly in this day and age, we are much more likely to laugh at the flaws of our own lives than point a finger and laugh at one character for being weird. The problem here is that they've stuck her with people who are arguably weirder than she is, so her social commentary feels pretty forced and kind of mean, but whatever. Enid in general is a classic foil to the anti-hero. She's sort of the show's moral compass, and by moving out of their dorm, she delivers a consequence for Wednesday's behavior. Yay, we love to see it, but this should have been a far more pivotal moment in the show than it was. I actually don't know if Wednesday is upset out of utilitarian regret since Enid can be useful, or out of emotional remorse for being a bad friend. Enid then moves back in not because of anything Wednesday does, but because Thing is attacked, which changes Enid's mind, and I'm highlighting this moment because I could just as easily imagine Wednesday manipulating Enid with a fake apology as I could imagine Wednesday actually apologizing. That the writers instead do neither and go for random plot convenience sort of gives away that they don't know what she'd do either. Because despite everything I just listed, despite an ostensible commitment to the idea of an anti-hero, Wednesday acts like a standard hero all the time. At sporadic intervals, we see her developing feelings for Tyler, I think, and definitely caring about her friends. She even obviously wanted the pretty dress in a very April Ludgate moment. Now, is this the end of her arc? Does she work towards caring for people like Han Solo or Eleven or Ebenezer Scrooge? No. At the end of this season, she's all hyped to commit torture. More importantly, as early as episode 3, she says the line, "Hummers stick together," when protecting Eugene. Not, "Okay, fine, I'll help you, but only because it helps me to help you." Even if it's just because Eugene reminds her of her brother, it's clear that Wednesday has always been capable of empathy, and more importantly, she has a firm understanding of abstract right versus wrong. And maybe, they could have convinced me that this is just compelling complexity if they had us intentionally guessing about her motives. They do a quick backstory on her scorpion pet, and it could have been a cool, ooh, is she an anti-hero or not? How much do we trust her? I don't know. But instead, we got that classic teen drama maneuver of making our protagonist a writer-narrator. With the notable exception of Joe in Little Women, I can't stand this trope. As Wednesday narrates to us as she's writing, we're seeing what's behind the curtain. We're seeing beyond her persona. And while we still don't have a clear answer on who Wednesday really is, because that narration exists, we can't guess at the truth under the ambiguity, because if there were a truth, we'd know it. The narration also gets in the way of a good mystery. We are absolutely overloaded with a ton of crap happening at the end of the first episode, and as it closes out, Wednesday announces to us that all of these things are connected. Don't do that. Let us work that out. Imagine if Harry Potter turned to the camera and was like, the break-ins at Gringotts, someone trying to kill me, Nicholas Flamel, Hagrid's dragon, Voldemort, they're all connected. We know they'll end up connected somehow. It's not a spoiler, but it once again cheapens our ability as audience to feel like we're part of the story, to work things out ourselves. We're in the backseat, being told things matter as we go along. And similarly, the consequence here with Wednesday's character build is that I have no idea what's driving our protagonist. She wants to solve the mystery, but why? For the greater good? For her family's name? For herself? Is she morbidly competitive with the Hyde? If it's true that Tyler was playing her the whole time, I should sort of feel devastated and betrayed on her part, but I don't know if she even cares. And if she does care, why was she so heartless to him the whole time? And if she doesn't care, why'd she kiss him? Obviously, in the context of real life, people act with this complexity and indecision all the time, but I'm talking narratively, and in the context of an otherwise super simple show. They easily could have given Wednesday a sort of boring transformative hero arc. With some creativity here and there, they could have delivered a genuinely fascinating anti-hero, and if they wanted to get fancy, they could have used that ambiguity with actual communicative purpose. But creating a sociopathic, violent, borderline villain anti-hero, and then cranking her through a very blatant good versus evil plot without developing her unique motives in a clear way lands us instead with a contradictory, albeit well-cast, protagonist. So the solution here is just to pick one and stick with it, focus less on generating snarky memes and more on the inner workings of the titular character, the most important ingredient to the whole show. This wouldn't actually affect the plot, but it would make Wednesday someone we can root for, either as another iteration of like a Harry Potter, or as a darker, less noble character who has inner workings we know and understand. So to recap, I suggested they change why Wednesday attends Nevermore, conceal the hide, collapse Rowan into Bianca, simplify the villain, use art as a character connection, and choose a lane for Wednesday. Some of these, particularly that last one, are admittedly a bit sweeping in nature, but some are course corrections on decisions that, as I said at the start, just seemed really weird from a storytelling perspective. Rowan in particular is a huge waste of time, and I have no idea how he stayed on the storyboard. But obviously, none of these adjustments would fix the actual writing problem, which is just that everything is geared towards plot convenience. And that does preclude some of these adjustments. They can't build out the world too comprehensively, because then we might realize that one singular werewolf can fight the hide, and we'd have to ask plot-ruining questions like, why doesn't Wednesday at least try to team up with one of the many superpower kids she spends all day with? They've literally got a Gorgon walking around. We can't flesh out Wednesday too much, because then we'd have to confront the fact that she doesn't actually solve this mystery at all. Everything she quote-unquote discovers is literally handed to her. And then her conclusions, that it's Kimba and Xavier, are way off. How will she ever uncover the actual truth? With a vision, of course. So ultimately, the real answer is problem, the writing is a bit lazy, solution, make it better. And the last negative thing I'll say is that this overarching problem of too much plot and too many characters, this oversaturation, is something that I do suspect is intentional. This could have been the year of the Cramps, with both Stranger Things and Wednesday featuring them.
And even murder.
Prick.
And it's not the show's fault that TikTok decided on Lady Gaga instead, but then Netflix went ahead and used Lady Gaga for the season 2 trailer. They're leaning into it. A lot of these decisions to pack in tons of characters and sassy moments feel less like narrative intention and more like throwing enough crap at our collective attention span wall in a way that generates enough social media attention and shipping so that we end up doing most of the show's marketing for it. And if you're someone who enjoys that stuff, if you liked the Lady Gaga reinvention, genuinely good for you. I'm genuinely glad that the story world is at least appealing enough to entice involvement outside of the show. But they also pack a season's worth of plot in the literal pilot, and that again is a binge model move. Nothing about this show is a slow burn. Despite how much is going on, most of it isn't developed enough to carry real weight, and the most we can do is just buckle up and hit next episode. But hey, it's still a really fun show. I didn't talk much about the things this show does right because I was focusing on problem solving here, but there is a lot to love. Despite obviously not uttering a word or even having a face, Thing is a great character. Catherine Zeta-Jones was the Morticia Addams I never knew I needed. Most of the visuals are pretty good, some are fantastic. The overall mood is great, and while way too much is going on, there's really no strand of plot that just doesn't go anywhere. And I will absolutely take a predictable plot over a meandering one. The subplots here all do serve the greater mystery in some way and wind up tying together as one big resolution, and these days that's a true blessing. The supporting characters are fun, the world has great potential, and it's hardly worth repeating at this point, but Jenna Ortega absolutely crushes every second of this role. She is electric and captivating in every sense. And finally, at the end of any first season, I really judge whether it was overall successful by whether or not I'm interested in seeing a second one. And I am. It's a great rainy day family watch. Do I think it's a high quality show? Not really. But it is a pretty good low quality one. Also, I love Gwendolyn Christie and she can do no wrong.
It's beautiful when there are those people who always have felt somewhat outside of conventional society are able to identify each other across the ether and work together.